In the bloody years of the Great Patriotic War, when the Soviet Union was fighting a desperate battle against Nazi Germany, the United States of America became its most important ally. For 4 long years, the American government provided invaluable assistance to the Soviet Union under the Lend-Lease program. This program included large-scale deliveries of a variety of weapons, advanced industrial equipment, machine tools, and necessary materials, totaling many billions of dollars. It is noteworthy that all of this aid was provided to the Soviet Union free of charge, albeit with certain conditions agreed upon between the two countries. However, alongside this, there is a little-known and rather curious fact. In the ranks of the Wehrmacht, the armed forces of Nazi Germany, hundreds of American citizens fought against the Red Army. These people, apparently, were staunch supporters of Nazi ideology and went to serve the enemy. 40 of these American soldiers were captured by Soviet troops and spent several years in Soviet prisoner-of-war camps. In 1946, they were all repatriated to their homeland, back to the United States. At the same time, it is worth noting that a significantly smaller number of U.S. citizens fought in the ranks of the Red Army, which makes their contribution to the common victory even more significant and unique. These people, despite all the circumstances, made their choice in favor of fighting the Hitlerites. I know the names of only 2 Americans who fought in the ranks of the Red Army, and their heroic deeds are all the more valuable and significant. Both of these soldiers displayed exceptional courage, risking their own lives, and fought the enemy with exceptional bravery and selflessness. One of these outstanding people was Joseph Barrel, whom many historians consider to be the only soldier in the entire history of World War II who directly participated in combat operations against German troops, both as part of the American Army and in the ranks of the Soviet Army. A decisive, and perhaps even fateful, role in his unusual destiny was played by a chance but significant meeting with the famous Marshal of the Soviet Union, Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov. The Screaming Eagles. Joseph Barrel, born in 1923, grew up in the picturesque state of Michigan. He was a gifted and diligent student, always striving for knowledge. And after graduating from high school, he was seriously preparing to enter the prestigious University of Notre Dame in Indiana. However, after the tragic and fateful events at Pearl Harbor, when the Japanese Air Force launched a surprise attack on the American naval base, the young man, driven by patriotic feelings and a deep sense of duty, voluntarily went to serve in the United States Army. Barrel felt a deep hatred for Adolf Hitler and his allies, especially for the Japanese, who had carried out a treacherous attack on the American naval base, which became the reason for the U.S. entry into World War II. After undergoing a tough and intensive selection process, which not all volunteers passed, he was enrolled in the elite 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, which had the unofficial but resounding nickname the Screaming Eagles. This regiment specialized in conducting particularly important and dangerous sabotage operations behind enemy lines. The intense and grueling training in the regiment lasted for 9 long months, from early morning until late evening, which hardened and prepared the recruits for the upcoming difficult and dangerous trials. In September 1943, the regiment was transferred to the territory of Great Britain, where their preparation for participation in the large-scale landing in Normandy began, which was to become the beginning of the liberation of Western Europe from occupation. By the time the large-scale Operation Overlord began, which was scheduled for June 1944, Sergeant Joseph Barrel had become an experienced and highly qualified professional in his field, having gone through many training sessions and trials. However, during the landing in Normandy, he was incredibly unlucky. The Douglas C-47 transport planes carrying paratroopers were unexpectedly discovered by German troops, who opened a fierce and merciless fire on them from anti-aircraft guns. 2 Douglas planes with saboteurs, who were the elite of the American Army, exploded right in front of the eyes of the shocked and stunned Joseph. He, like the other paratroopers, had to urgently and in extremely dangerous conditions abandon the burning and falling plane, using parachutes during the landing. Beryl accidentally landed on the roof of an old village church, as a result of which he seriously injured his leg and almost completely lost the ability to move normally. He was forced to hide and lie low for several agonizing days, after which, despite severe pain in his injury, he began to operate alone, using the remnants of his combat equipment. He managed to blow up several important substations, thereby disrupting the power supply to German facilities. But then he was discovered by German soldiers and taken prisoner. Escape after escape. In German captivity, most American prisoners of war behaved quietly and tried not to attract undue attention. They complied with the established rules and hoped for an early release. Unlike Soviet prisoners of war, who were in much more difficult conditions, the conditions of detention for Americans in German camps were relatively tolerable and even, one might say, good. Twice a month, they received parcels from the International Red Cross, which contained items such as smoked sausage and instant coffee, which was a pleasant change for them. They were even allowed to play cards and football, which of course was absolutely inaccessible to Soviet soldiers who were subjected to much worse conditions. However, Joseph Beryl was not like the others at all. He was full of determination and repeatedly, with amazing persistence and perseverance, made escapes from prisoner of war camps in a short period of time. In just 7 months, he managed to change 7 different camps and prisons, and he went through numerous interrogations, but they failed to break him. After his second daring escape from Stalag 3C, located in the territory of occupied Poland, at night Joseph carefully sneaked into a freight car fully loaded with grain. We ask you to subscribe to our channel and like, so that you can hear many more interesting stories about the Second World War and the opinions of all sides of the participants about certain events. Initially, the fugitive believed that the train was moving in an easterly direction, toward the front line, but to his great surprise and disappointment, he found himself in the heart of Nazi Germany. In Berlin, he was captured by agents of the Gestapo, the German secret police, which was engaged in the persecution and destruction of opponents of the Hitler regime. After that, he was imprisoned, where he spent 2 long and agonizing weeks. After this period ended, the American was returned to the same prisoner of war camp, the third, and this time successful. Escape attempt took place in the first days of January 1945, when Soviet troops were already close to the borders of Germany. During this escape, unfortunately, the guard shot 2 of Beryl's comrades who were trying to escape with him. For several days, Joseph, hungry and exhausted, made his way through dense forests to the east, trying to orient himself by the sounds of artillery fire, which indicated the approach of Soviet troops. And when he finally saw Soviet tanks, he, without hesitation for a second, went out to them, loudly shouting in pure Russian, "I am an American comrade in the ranks of the Red Army." Beryl was greatly impressed by 2 facts that he saw when he came to the Soviet soldiers. These facts amazed his imagination and, apparently, had a profound emotional impact on him. Firstly, the Russian soldiers were fighting on American Sherman tanks, which were supplied to the USSR as part of the Lend-Lease program. This fact, on the one hand, pleased him, but on the other hand, surprised him because he believed that American weapons could only be used by his compatriots. Secondly, the tank unit was commanded by a woman, which was completely unusual and surprising for him, since women did not serve in the tank forces in the American Army. He did not remember her first and last name, but most likely it was the legendary Alexandra Samasenko, the only female tank driver who held the position of Deputy Tank Battalion Commander. After a thorough check of Joseph's identity, he was going to be sent to Odessa, and from there he was to leave for his homeland, the United States. However, the American begged to be left as part of the tank unit, since he felt an insurmountable desire and thirst to fight the enemy, whom he greatly disliked. By that time, the open, honest, brave, and good-natured American quickly won the hearts of the Soviet tankers. In addition, he turned out to be very capable and managed to repair a couple of radio stations on the Sherman tanks, which finally won the favor of the Red Army soldiers, and he was gladly left in the unit. Joseph was issued a reliable PPSH submachine gun, and he began to fight as a machine gunner as part of the Second Belarusian Front. Only 70 kilometers remained to Berlin, but these kilometers were filled with fierce battles and proved to be very difficult and dangerous. At the end of January, Beryl took direct part in the liberation of the Stalag 3C camp, from which he had repeatedly escaped. How surprised were the American and English prisoners of war when they saw their recent comrade in misfortune in the ranks of the liberators, in the uniform of a Soviet soldier. Zhukov's magical letter. During the difficult crossing of the Oder River, a T-34-85 tank, on the armor of which were paratroopers, including Joseph, was hit by an aircraft bomb. As a result of this powerful explosion, the American was seriously wounded and was urgently hospitalized in the hospital of the city of Landsberg. At the end of February, the famous Marshal Georgy Zhukov unexpectedly arrived at the hospital. He was informed that there was an American soldier in the medical institution who had fought heroically. In the ranks of the Red Army, the Marshal, amazed by this amazing story, expressed a desire to meet the wounded man personally. Joseph, gathering his last strength, briefly and honestly told Marshal Zhukov his biography and asked him to help him return to his homeland, the USA. Surprised and impressed by the unusual and heroic story of the American soldier, the commander immediately fulfilled the request, and Beryl was given a protective letter with the personal signature of Marshal Zhukov. This letter had a truly magical effect on all those checking documents and helped Joseph to freely get into any train or truck. Thanks to this magical document, Joseph reached the American embassy in Moscow without much difficulty or problems. And from there, through Odessa, he safely departed for New York. The meeting with his family turned out to be bright, long-awaited, and very emotional. At home, they considered him killed during the landing in Normandy and had already mourned him in the local church. In the 1970s and 1980s, Beryl repeatedly came to the Soviet Union for the celebration of Victory Day to pay tribute to his fellow soldiers. He was rightfully awarded orders and medals of the United States, as well as the Medal for Courage, USSR, and the Medal 50 Years of Victory, RF, and one more curious and remarkable fact: Joseph's son, John Beryl, held the high and responsible position of U.S. Ambassador to Russia from 2008 to 2012. Goodbye. We were glad to see you on our channel. Don't forget to write comments, like, and subscribe to the channel.